Welcome to the Porn Reboot podcast, where you get practical tips to gaining control over your porn or sex addiction. We help ambitious men end their out-of-control sexual behavior with pornography, sex, and masturbation so that you can maximize your life, perform at your potential, and remain in control in the driver's seat, which is where you have to be in order to gain or maintain the success you want in life. I'm your host, J.K. Emezi, certified sex and porn addiction recovery coach. Welcome to the episode. Brother, this week is a special week. It is a week that is dedicated to our brothers with ADHD and ADHD who are struggling with a pornography addiction. A few years ago, I'd say about 2 years ago, I began to suspect that a good portion of the brothers in our program were struggling with undiagnosed ADD and ADHD. I had a few conversations with Dr. Howard Rankin, who is one of the coaches in the Porn Reboot program, and we decided to run a few tests. Well, first of all, I myself am ADD. Turns out the vast majority of the men who resonate with my work and my message are men who struggle with an out-of-control sexual behavior and also have ADD or ADHD. I would estimate that about 60 to 70% of men who chronically struggle with pornography have undiagnosed ADD. However, you might think you don't have ADD or ADHD, or you might be uncertain, or you might have some bias. You have a certain way, or rather you believe that people who have ADD or ADHD act in a certain way, and you're like, nah, I don't think that's me. So what I'm going to be doing this week is very simple. I am going to be making the connection for you. And I'm going to begin with talking about neurodiversity today and explaining what ADD and ADHD is and how it relates to out-of-control sexual behavior. Pay attention, my brothers. Today we're going to be talking about what we call in our ADHD Reboot program. It's a new program that was launched by Dr. Rankin and I. He is the coach in it, is the Neurodiversity Manifesto, which is how we move from something like ADD and ADHD, which is seen as a medical deficit in men and boys, to cognitive diversity. And I'll skip the history of it. Well, actually, I'll give you a little bit of the history, first of all. In the 1900s to the 1950s, it was originally thought to be some form of brain damage when you had ADD, ADHD. Most times they thought it was a result of encephalitis, and people who had struggled with encephalitis, they exhibited what they call post-encephalitic behavioral disorder. So basically, they just thought your brain was damaged. This evolved in the 1960s to the 1970s, where it was renamed minimal brain dysfunction. Basically, it was described as a hyperkinetic impulse disorder. And they started moving towards a more neurobiological model than an organic damage point of view. So they were like, oh, something is wrong neurobiologically with you, and it isn't that you damaged your brain. And from the 1980s up until today, so for the past 40 years, it's more of a neurodevelopmental disorder. So this means that people started noticing that their parents also exhibited the same behaviors, or their brothers and sisters. And they began to notice that, oh, there are some executive function disorders. There's an impact on your prefrontal cortex. And we started to see that these were actual neurological things that were passed down from generation to generation, not just quote unquote bad behavior. Some of you who grew up as being told that you couldn't sit still, that you were bad, that you were not smart, and so on, we're now starting to find out that you were none of those things. You're actually just fine. So the focus has, of course, shifted from historical belief of this was something that only affected children who would eventually grow out of it. Later on, research showed that, and this was in the 70s and 80s, that the symptoms of ADHD persisted into adulthood. And then now we have the modern understanding that there are different types of ADHD, the top 3 types being combined, inattentive, and hyperactive impulsive. Hyperactive impulsive would be the H in the ADHD. As of this time, there are 2 competing perspectives. The first is the scientific view. And those who are proponents of that view, they believe that ADD is a genuine, let's just call it evolution in scientific understanding. They recognize that many people struggle with focus, even if they're not physically restless, which is one of the symptoms, the physical restlessness of ADD. Then we have what is called the critical view. So critics argue that Big Pharma sort of created or cultivated this medical industrial complex, and that they funded people who advocated for broader diagnostic criteria. So basically, they took different neurodiverse behaviors in human beings and they put everything under this banner of ADD and ADHD. So this would mean that as human beings, we are very diverse in the ways we think, in the ways we process things, in our personality. But the pharmaceutical industrial machine needed to make money. And so it had doctors and opinion leaders paid so that they would tell your parents when you were growing up that all these beautiful, diverse behaviors that you had, well, they were all ADHD and you needed to be medicated, which is just a horrible human thing. There's also one theory that is my favorite theory that I'd love to share with you, and it is the theory of a hunter in a farmer's world. So basically, the belief is that back in the day, in a hunter society where most people went out to hunt for their food, traits like hyper awareness, which means being easily distracted, being very impulsive. So like you would respond rapidly to something that would give you dopamine, which would be like, hunting for food, seeing an animal that you could eat, and intense focus, which is of course necessary in order to track your prey or survival advantages. And now we live in a farmer's world. So basically in a farmer's world, these were societies that valued more like linear timing, doing repetitive tasks. You're sitting down for long hours, you're planting, you're harvesting, you're cleaning and prepping the crops. So if you genetically are wired to actually be a hunter, then you want to understand that there's nothing wrong with you. Those traits of being easily distracted and impulsive and hyper-focused, in a hunter-based society, you would be fine. You're simply a hunter that is trying to survive in a farmer's cubicle. I hope you're with me so far. And within the ADHD reboots, we have this Neurodiversity Manifesto. And I want to share it with you because I think it's very important for men who are trying to end the out-of-control sexual behavior. There are 4 pillars. The first is difference, not deficits. Basically, you don't have a lack of attention. You have an abundance of, let's just call it unregulated intensity. You're an intense guy. And what we do is, while you're rebooting, we are going to focus on directing that intensity instead of suppressing it. The second is realizing that your environment is the variable. So when people say, oh, he has ADHD as a disability, he needs to be on medication, that often only exists when a brain is placed in an incompatible environment. So in ADHD reboots, and I'm mentioning ADHD reboot because it's an actual program. There is no obligation for you to join it. I'll be teaching as much as I can this week on the podcast so that at least you can be educated. But in the program, we focus on environmental design to match your specific cognitive profile, which we will help you discover over time. The third is regulation over eradication. So basically, we aren't trying to cure the ADHD out of you. What we're actually doing is we're building up the routines, the tools, and the mindsets that is going to allow your specific type of brain to thrive. And finally, we don't want you apologizing anymore. Honestly, you've probably spent years apologizing to your wife, to so many people. Think about it. If you've struggled with an out-of-control behavior, you have ADD or ADHD, and you keep promising people you're going to do things, but you don't. You show up late. You keep being impulsive. You keep being quote unquote messy. You keep being not enough. You keep apologizing for being too much or doing too much or not enough. Listen, joining our program means an end to apologizing. We do not believe in that. It is the end of apology and the beginning of the optimization of your life. I want you to become aware of it. And I actually want to give you a homework before tomorrow's podcast. And that would be an identity reframe. What I'd like you to do is I would like you to write down 3 to 4 negative labels that you've been given. And they could be things like, for me, it was slow. It was dreamy, like my head was always in the clouds. So like, JK, you're always fucking daydreaming. JK's dreaming. People have accused me over the years of being late, of being unreliable. So what I want you to do is take a pen and paper and write down these negative labels. And then I want you to reframe them, but I want you to reframe them into a neurodiverse way. What does that mean? It means that if you've been told that you are lazy, understand that you are understimulated when it comes to dopamine. So basically, the task you were given, you can do it, but that task doesn't release dopamine for you. And I know you might be like, well, other people can do it. That's true. Other people can wash the dishes. And for some people, believe it or not, a little bit of dopamine is released for them because they recognize that there is a positive association for them with washing the dishes, and that is the sight of clean dishes. Now, the thing with you is that you could see clean dishes and you really appreciate clean dishes. Why wouldn't you? But for you, the thought and the sight of it does nothing. You're just not wired that way. And thus you feel you are seen to be lazy because you procrastinate on doing it because you know there's no benefit for you. Even though it's obvious what the benefit is, you want clean dishes. If people have said that you're unreliable, then understand it's not that you're unreliable, it's just that your executive function is overloaded. So basically, consider your executive function or your prefrontal cortex to be like a project manager, and it's usually over capacity. Your prefrontal cortex can only handle, let's say, 5 tasks, while a normal person's can handle, let's say, 14 or 15 tasks. It's just that those that you have in your prefrontal cortex, you will focus on them better than a normal person would on their tasks. So if anything else is added to those 5, a 6th or a 7th task, you're just not going to do it. You're going to show up late. You're going to totally forget about it. It's almost like it's being forced in there into a shelf that's full and it keeps falling off the shelf. That's why you seem to forget so many things. And let's say people said, man, your head is always in the clouds. You're always distracted. You never listen to me. You're never focused. It just means that you naturally, as a hunter, are constantly and naturally scanning your environment. Remember, hunter in a farmer's world. You are programmed to scan and pick up stimuli and notice things a normal person wouldn't. Your brain is doing its job, which is scanning for new data. I hope you found this first episode in our ADHD series helpful. I'll see you on the next podcast episode. If you're interested in learning more about ADHD Reboot, there's a link to a workshop that we did with Dr. Rankin a couple of weeks ago. I highly recommend you check it out, and I'll see you soon. I'm JK, your brother in this struggle. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Porn Reboot podcast. I'll speak to you later on in the week. If you found this episode helpful, here are 4 ways I can help you with your out-of-control sexual behavior for free. The first way is to grab a free copy of my book, Confessions of a Porn Addict, 7 Secrets of Porn-Free Men at elevatedrecovery.org, or visit the link in the description below this episode. The second way is, if you're not sure where to start, but you'd like to learn more about my team and I, if you'd like to spend time with like-minded professionals and business owners who are controlling their behavior, then join our free and confidential group, the Porn Reboot group on Facebook. There's a link to join in the description below this episode. The third way is if you need help right now because you have a burning issue, your behavior with pornography is hurting you mentally or emotionally, you're about to lose your relationship, you want to live up to your potential, be an authentic man, and free yourself from shame, guilt, and underachieving, then click on the link in the description below this episode that says free coaching call. And the fourth way is to leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy this podcast, so that we can reach more men who are struggling in silence and bring back the lessons we learn from coaching them to freedom.